Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This episode is Astral Telepathy. Before we get started, real quick, if you'd like to support the work of Astral Club and the spreading of the information about astral projection, you can do so by going to the description where you'll find a link to go to the Patreon site. Once you join, you'll get commercial-free videos. There's an email where we can talk back and forth, and you get your advanced videos on Sunday. Next up, if you'd like a private astral projection lesson where you can learn how to project or increase the quality and quantity of your present projections, I'd be glad to help. If you'd like more information, you'll find in the description there is an email where you can request more details about the particular lesson. Okay, astral telepathy. In the physical world, one communicates ordinarily with the spoken language and the written language. These are the two main ways that people communicate on the physical plane. However, when one astral projects, one is no longer on the physical plane. You are on, by definition, the astral plane. And written and spoken languages are not done. They're not done in the astral. They're not used. What is used is astral telepathy. I know when I first started projecting as a kid, I spent a lot of time just exploring on my own. I was a little leery about contacting or dealing with other entities. As I got older, I had some encounters with a few earthbound entities, and I was still just a kid, so some of the experiences I had were unpleasant. So I spent a lot of time just exploring on my own. However, eventually, I started having contact with positive beings and slowly learned to communicate effectively using astral telepathy. Now, when you talk about astral telepathy, I want to make sure that I disabuse you of any confusion. You are not projecting and receiving words in astral telepathy. What you receive when you are communicated with and you are open to communication, you receive emotions and you receive pictures. These are the two primary components of astral telepathy. So, you can only imagine how difficult it must be whenever I'm trying to communicate with non-human intelligences. Because at least if I'm talking with another human on the astral plane or a soul that had once been human, there is familiar frames of reference. Anyone who's had lifetimes on the physical world understands what cold means, what hot means. They understand and they remember how it felt in their physical body. But imagine being an alien who doesn't sense temperature, let's say. Imagine trying to communicate with that being about the sensations of cold and hot. How would you do it? How would you explain in a very real and palpable way what it feels like to be cold or it feels like to be too hot to an entity that has never had that experience and does not have the necessary sensory apparatus to do so? So that's just an example. Obviously, there are many more that you could introduce. But on the astral, telepathy is how one communicates. So I started getting better as I started using my telepathy more often when I astral projected. I also noticed that many times, especially during periods of time where I did a lot of projection, I would retain my astral abilities, or at least residual amounts of astral abilities that I could still use while in the physical. And we're going to talk in a little bit, so hang with me. I'm going to talk how you can go through and practice some steps to help you to begin to use your telepathic talents, hopefully, so that you can then use them when you astral project. Okay, let's state some examples here. Um, when I was about 12, my sister would have been about 10 or 11. Uh, I wanted to do experiments because I was using my astral telepathy, and I wanted, I felt that it was still hanging with me to a degree in the physical. So I wanted to do experiments. And one of the first experiments I did was I got my hands on some of those a deck of telepathy type cards. You've seen them before. They used to be called ESP cards, extrasensory perception. There'd be, it would just be a white card with black uh, figures like circles, triangle, square, squiggly line, star, basic images. And the idea with these cards was the sender would stare at the card, and the receiver would clear their mind and say the first shape that came into their head. Now, there was a baseline percentage which everyone should arrive at just by chance. If you have only X number of shaped cards, then it's fairly easy to figure out what your win percentage will be based on pure luck. So if you can sustain on a regular basis a higher than baseline score, then that is an indicator that perhaps astral telepathy is actually functioning. So I would do these tests with my sister and my brother, and he was about 4 years younger than I was. But I did most of them with my sister. And whenever I was doing the sending, she would score much higher than what she should have by pure guesswork. When she sent to me, I still scored better than the basic guessing figure that you would expect. But it seemed that when I was doing the sending, and when I used my brother in experiments, the same thing happened. So it seemed that I was better at sending the images than receiving them. Although, as I said, personally, I proved that I was above average in all of those different areas. I just was a better sender than a receiver. And once again, I account for that my extensive astral production experience. So anyway, I would do these cards, and we got scores that were much better than you could expect, but it still wasn't enough proof for me. At that age, I was learning science, and so I wanted something that was much more conclusive than the ESP cards. So I told my sister, I gave her a pad and a pen, told her to go upstairs, to clear her mind, and to draw the first image that came into her mind. That was literally the only instruction I gave her. So essentially, the world was her oyster. When she went upstairs and closed the door, I concentrated I drew a picture of a simplified stick man, which was really just a circle with a cross underneath it. And I concentrated using my pineal gland to send that image direct to my sister. Well, she came down in a couple of minutes and had drawn a circle with a cross on top. So in essence, with all the things in the world to pick from, she ended up picking a reverse image of what I was sending. So I think you could say that was a pretty good hit from a telepathic sending and receiving standpoint. Another thing that I would practice, my brother would be somewhere playing on the block. In one particular instance, he was at the end of the street, the bottom of the street. It was almost a full block, city block away. And I would send a message like, come home. And in one particular instance that I remember of many, I was concentrating on that signal, come home, come home, come home. Within a few minutes, I saw him running up the street. He came to our driveway and then he looked up at me and said, "What?" Because he'd heard my voice and my telepathic command to come home. And so he wasn't surprised. He looked up and said, "What?" Because I would do that all the time. And, it became a bit of an annoyance. And in this case, I interrupted his baseball game because he kept on getting this signal, come home, come home, come home. And he knew it was me. So that is, yet another story. I recall training sales reps. One particular sales rep, I've been doing a lot of projecting, and I had a lot of residual telepathic ability. I would answer question after question for him, only to find out that he hadn't actually asked it of me yet using physical language. I picked up his thoughts. They were so easy to read at that point. And and they started looking at me strangely. And I realized, oh, I better back off here because he's going to get spooked because I was reading his thoughts. Lastly, I remember last winter, I knew my daughter was driving home, and I knew it was snowing up there. But I kind of checked in with her as she was going home, telepathically, and everything seemed fine. And then at one point, I sensed this extreme emotion, this panic, and I looked up on this app that we share as a family, and I could see she was on this hill that is right before her home, but she wasn't moving forward like she should be. And that's when I found out that her car couldn't go up the hill because there was too much snow, and she had been panicking a little bit, and I'd picked up on it. So there's some examples of telepathy in use that I experienced and I believe came to me as a result of many of the astral projections that I did. How can you start to develop your astral telepathy even before you begin astral projecting? Well, first up, we have to activate the pineal gland. Now, if you look online, there's a lot of things that people recommend. However, for me, what I do typically when I want to sharpen up my pineal gland is when I close my eyes to go to sleep at night, in that interim period before I fall asleep, I will concentrate on my pineal gland and try to see my room through my pineal gland while my eyes are closed. And I usually have a decent amount of success. The vision comes in blacks and grays, but I think, what I'm doing here is I'm activating the pineal gland, and it's starting to give me, feedback that is available, typically from the astral plane. So that's one way you can do that. And I always like exercises that don't waste a lot of time. I mean, you have to fall asleep anyway. If you're doing it right, you should feel a definite pressure on your third eye. And if you're not sure where your third eye is, look it up online. You can get a pretty good idea. So if you're doing this exercise before you fall asleep with your physical eyes closed, you should eventually start getting some images. And you should definitely feel some heat and a little bit of pressure where your third eye or your pineal gland is located. Number 2, you want to practice sending a portion of your consciousness to a family member or a close friend. It's easier to start telepathic work with people that you know well and people that you trust. So I figure a family member or a close friend is a good way to start. When you do that, the first thing you'll probably start receiving are emotions. If you'll start feeling whether the person's happy, sad, bored, tired, sleeping, even. It takes a little bit of practice, but you should start sensing that first. Eventually, you should also get isolated snapshot pictures, images that perhaps they're seeing at the time. That is the next stage of the process. Uh, Lastly, practice communicating thoughts and ideas for yourself using just emotions and pictures. What I mean by this is it's actually a skill to use your astral telepathy to send to others and then for those others to send to you. And I mentioned how difficult it is when you're dealing with aliens. You need to get into practice of putting your own thoughts not into words, but into pictures and emotions. Because when you actually telepathically communicate with someone on the physical or definitely on the astral, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be receiving or you're going to be sending pictures and emotions. And then the receiver will absorb these pictures and emotions to one effective degree or another. And then they will have to translate that into a spoken or written language. And there is a skill to that. So that's why I say get into practice. Let's say you're driving somewhere and you have a thought. Take that thought and cut it up into emotions and pictures and practice thinking in those terms because that's how you're going to communicate telepathically. Well, that's the information I wanted to get across here. If you practice that, you should find that your telepathic skills will increase. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think you'll find you'll be able to make some progress. And when you do project, or you are currently projecting, you'll have a better and easier time receiving communication from friendly beings and sending information to allied beings. Well, if you enjoyed that presentation, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, make sure the bell button's on so that you get notified when videos on Wednesday at 2 p.m. and Saturdays at 8:15 a.m. are posted. And once again, that's Eastern Time US or New York City time. Keep those questions and comments coming. They're always great. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.